can I ask you to do me a favor? Suburban women, will you please like me? Remember? Please. Please. I saved your damn neighborhood, okay? The other thing, I don't have that much time to be that nice. You know, I can do it, but I gotta go quickly.
That was President Trump Tuesday night at a rally in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, roughly an hour east of Pittsburgh. Suburban support, especially in the battleground of Pennsylvania, helped President Trump clinch the 2016 election. Both candidates are now targeting key states like this with new TV ad spending. This week, Mr. Trump is focusing the bulk of his money in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Michigan. 3 states he won by narrow margins in 2016. For more on these 3 battlegrounds, let's bring in Jon Delano, Jim DeFede, and Riley Beggin. Jon is the money and politics editor for our Pittsburgh station, KDKA. Jim is an investigative reporter with our Miami station, WFOR. And Riley is a political reporter for Bridge, Michigan, which describes itself as a nonpartisan, nonprofit news outlet. Welcome. Our viewers are really in for a treat. I was thinking the combined political coverage experience right now that they're seeing on their screen is decades at least, right? All right, so Jon, let's start with you and the president's trip to Pennsylvania. Give us some context here. What might be behind his very public plea to be liked by suburban women?
Well, first, Elaine, always great to be with you. Yes, indeed. I mean, I suppose if you want to plead for a little love, that's a tactic to use with suburban women. I'm not sure it's going to work. I think the fact is that suburban women are perfectly intelligent to make up their own minds, and many of them already have, judging by the number of applications for mail-in ballots that we now allow in Pennsylvania for the first time in a general election. You know, this is a state that's big, it's diverse. The president won it by just 0.7%. I mean, that's really close. 44,000 votes out of 6.1 million cast. We expect more voters this time. And the question is, will there be more voting for Joe Biden or more voting for Donald Trump? Suburban women are clearly important, but it's only one of the number of constituencies the president is going to need in order to win Pennsylvania again.
Meanwhile, Jim, Joe Biden is making his pitch to seniors in South Florida. On Tuesday, he criticized the president's attacks on Obamacare and a failure to come up with an alternative. Let's play some of that.
We've got to protect your health care. In the middle of this pandemic, why do the Republicans have time to hold a hearing to pack the court instead of providing significant economic relief in need for localities? It's about wiping out the Affordable Care Act, to wipe it off the books. Because their nominee has said in the past that the law should be struck down.
Jim, how important are the issues of COVID-19, the Affordable Care Act, and Medicare in South Florida?
They're critical. Just as you said, it's a real play for older voters. To give you some perspective, in 2016, Donald Trump won 65-plus voters across the country by like 9 points. In Florida, he won those voters by 17 points. Now, recent polls have the president actually that gap much smaller, and in some polls, former Vice President Biden actually is ahead among seniors. So that's why you hear him not only talking about the Affordable Care Act, but how he believes that President Trump's tax policies will endanger Social Security and Medicare as well.
Our latest CBS News Battleground tracker shows Joe Biden holding a 6-point lead over President Trump in Michigan. The Trump campaign made Michigan visits a top priority in the home stretch of the 2016 bid. I want to play some sound from then candidate Trump, who was campaigning into the wee hours of the morning on Election Day.
So it's now officially Tuesday, November 8th. Did you ever think you'd be hearing a major speech like at around close to 1 o'clock in the morning? Are we crazy? Is this crazy?
So, Riley, how do the Trump campaign's efforts in Michigan compare to 2016? And what kind of resources has the Biden camp put into Michigan?
Yeah, so compared to 2016, the Trump campaign is continuing to really put a focus on the state. At the time, Hillary Clinton's campaign sort of left the state high and dry, and in the end, Trump carried the state by less than 10,000 votes, a very, very tight margin. The differences that we're seeing in the campaigns right now are really affected by COVID. So for months, the Biden campaign has really avoided doing in-person campaigning. He's been here, his surrogates have been here, but his events have not had press all the time at them. They haven't had public events, but the Trump campaign is obviously doing the opposite. We've had a couple rallies. He'll be here on Saturday, and thousands of people come to those. The Biden campaign has just changed their tactic. They are doing door-to-door canvassing now, but that is just a change over the last few weeks.
Well, Michigan's Secretary of State said more than 1 million voters have already cast their ballots, and she said the state is on track to have a record number of voters. Now, you reported Tuesday, Riley, that thousands of poll watchers are expected on Election Day. In light of the alleged kidnapping plot on Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, how are local officials and voting advocacy groups preparing for Election Day?
Yeah, so there is a widespread effort on both political parties and on a number of advocacy groups and local municipalities to prepare for anything that could happen on Election Day. We have sort of loose gun regulations in the state, but the Attorney General and Secretary of State's office are putting together guidance on what is and is not allowed, guidance on what constitutes voter intimidation, which is obviously a crime. But the AG's office and a number of voting rights advocacy groups, including the NAACP and the ACLU, are going to have hotlines available for people to report potential issues on Election Day. But unfortunately, in the end, we really are just going to have to see what happens. And officials are saying, go out to the polls, don't be afraid to vote, and just call something in if it does happen.
Well, we know that there are multiple lawsuits in Pennsylvania challenging voting methods in the state. A federal judge in Pittsburgh threw out a Trump campaign suit challenging the use of drop boxes. I spoke with State Attorney General Josh Shapiro yesterday. Let's listen to some of what he said.
What we're not going to let the president do is come into Pennsylvania and rewrite the laws to suit him. And the reason I say to suit him is because it's clear what he's trying to do right now is eliminate certain votes from being counted, make it harder for people to participate in our democracy.
So, John, is there a sense of what voters are making of all these legal challenges? Is it causing confusion?
Well, of course it's caused confusion. And frankly, Pennsylvania is ground zero when it comes to these lawsuits. And it's not just the Trump campaign filing lawsuits. The Democrats, through the government, which is the Department of State that coordinates elections, and we have a Democratic administration in Pennsylvania, they have filed lawsuits as well. And so, for example, one lawsuit involves whether or not counties should be allowed to count ballots after the election, even if they are postmarked, although they might be postmarked on Election Day. Right now, state law says if you don't have the ballot in hand by 8 p.m. on Election Day, it cannot be counted. But the Democrats went to the state Supreme Court and asked to count ballots for 3 extra days. The state Supreme Court said yes, because of the post office situation, that the state of Pennsylvania will have an extra 3 days to count ballots. At the same time, the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, went to court to prevent drop boxes. 20 counties of our 67 have set up satellite offices so that folks can really make it more convenient to take these mail-in ballots and drop them off rather than put them into the U.S. Postal Service. That's the case, Elaine, that you just cited, where a Trump-appointed lawyer said to the Trump campaign, put up or shut up. Show us evidence of fraud, and there is no evidence of fraud, so he tossed the lawsuit out. All of these cases could be on appeal to higher courts. It makes it hard to know exactly what voters, and I might argue even more importantly, what election officials are supposed to do on Election Day. These suits are ongoing, and there are others as well.
Data show that Democrats in Florida are outpacing Republicans when it comes to early voting, something the GOP has long dominated in the state. Jim, even though ballots aren't opened or tabulated yet, what's your take on the significance of that data?
Well, I think we have to be a little cautious. Because of the pandemic, we really don't know how voting patterns have radically changed. But there are a few factors that are positive for Democrats. So let me give you one example. In 2016, 3.3 million Floridians requested ballots in the mail. Already, so far in 2020, that number is close to 6 million. So people are clearly requesting ballots to come by the mail. Now, are they cannibalizing the in-person voting? That's hard to tell. But one thing that is interesting is you're right, and Democrats take a lot of solace from the fact that Democratic return rates are much higher than Republicans. And in one category in particular, let me give you these numbers, because this was really amazing to me. Of the 2 million ballots that have already been returned, votes by mail that have been returned, 400,000 of them did not vote in 2016. And among those, Democrats have a 100,000 vote advantage. So in other words, 100,000 more Democrats than Republicans are returning ballots who didn't vote in 2016. So those types of numbers are making Democrats feel very optimistic. But again, we just don't know how the pandemic is changing voting patterns, and the Republicans are expected to have a huge turnout on Election Day. So it may all level out in the end, and I still think Florida is going to be razor close at the end of the night.
Jon Delano, Jim DeFede, and Riley Beggin, great to have you all. Thank you.